In this video, we will be replacing our system hard drive with a solid state drive. Now what I mean by a system drive, it is the drive that contains the operating system. It is the drive that the computer boots from. And in my case, it is also the drive that contains all of my application software. My files such as emails, pictures, videos, Photoshop documents, Word documents, they reside on a totally separate drive. So those files and those drives are not affected by this change. So what will we need to do this? Obviously, we will need the solid state drive, and it has to have enough capacity to hold the content that is on the current system drive. And we'll see in this video how much space is being used by the current system drive. This SSD is the size of a 2.5-inch drive. Well, desktop computers typically use 3.5-inch drives. So another item we need is an adapter that allows a 2.5-inch drive to be used in a 3.5-inch drive bay. So we'll be seeing how to attach the SSD to the adapter, and we'll see how to attach the chassis to the adapter so that it'll fit inside the drive bay of the computer. Since I do not want to install Windows and reinstall all of my application software, I'm going to be using cloning software to clone the current system hard drive to the SSD. Specifically, this is the cloning software that I'll be using, and it is the Home Edition. The basic process is as follows. We're going to prepare the computer for migrating the operating system to the SSD. We're going to install the SSD into an available drive bay. We'll be using the cloning software to clone the operating system and all my application software to the SSD. We'll then remove the old system hard drive and place the SSD into its bay. Then we'll restart the computer and make sure everything is okay. At this point, let's prepare the computer for migrating the operating system. Now this step you actually want to perform before you buy your solid state drive, because what we need to do is see how much space the current system drive is using. So we go to File Explorer, find your current system drive, right click it, and click Properties. This is telling me that the entire drive is 271 gigabytes, of which 115 gigabytes are being used. Now, my solid state drive is 500 gigabytes, so I've got plenty of space to migrate my current system drive to the SSD. If you had a much larger drive and you were using in excess of 300 gigabytes of space, and you had purchased a 250 gigabyte solid state drive, you would have to be removing software or removing something off your current drive so it'll just fit on your new solid state drive. Again, this is something you want to do before you purchase your drive. So the first thing I did in terms of preparation steps is I created a restore point. I go to Control Panel, so I click on Start. I've got Control Panel over here. If you don't, just put your cursor over here, but don't click anything, and type Control Panel. So click Control Panel. If your control panel looks like this, you can go over to View by Category and click either large or small icons. Then click on System. Click on System Protection. Make sure you're on the System Protection tab, and then click the Create button to create a restore point. Give it a meaningful description. I'm going to say before SSD, then click Create. Click Close. Click OK. And go back to the control panel. What we want to do next is uninstall any programs you no longer want. So go to Programs and Features, click it, and it's going to list all the application software you have. So you want to go through your list and uninstall anything you no longer need. Now here's a couple important points. If you don't recognize what this is, I would not uninstall it. If you're not sure whether you still need it or not, I would not uninstall it. Only uninstall those items that you know for sure that you want to get rid of. And the way you do is you just click an item, then click uninstall. Now, I've already been through this list before the video, and I've already uninstalled a couple things, so I don't need to do an uninstall now. The next thing we want to do is do a disk cleanup. So let's go back to Control Panel, click on Administrative Tools, or double-click Disk Cleanup. Since I'm replacing the operating system drive, make sure it's selected here, click OK. What I want to do next is I want to click Clean Up System Files. Now, when I click it, it's actually not going to clean up anything. It's just going to recalculate this to include system files. It's re-asking the drive. Click OK. Alright, it says Windows Update Cleanup. Windows keeps copies of all installed updates from Windows Update, even after installing new versions of Update. Windows Update Cleanup deletes or compresses older versions of updates that are no longer needed and taking up space. So this is taking up almost 2 gigabytes of space, so I want to check it. The next one is Windows Update Log Files. I'm going to just read the last sentence. Deleting these files can make it difficult to troubleshoot installation issues. I'm going to leave that alone. I'm not going to click it. Downloaded program files. It's not taking up any space. That doesn't need to be checked. Temporary internet files. Contain web pages stored on your hard disk for quick viewing. Your personalized settings for web pages will be left intact. So I'm okay with deleting that. It's free up about 13 megabytes. System created Windows error reports. Files used for error reporting and solution checking. It's only taking up 355 kilobytes. I'm going to leave it there. Next one is 0. Delivery optimization files, taking up 91.6 megabytes. It says delivery optimization files are files that were previously downloaded to your computer and can be deleted if currently unused by the delivery optimization service. I have no idea they're being used by the current delivery optimization service, so I'm just going to leave them there. Device driver is 0. There's nothing there. Not going to deal with it. Previous Windows installations, taking up 1 gigabyte. Files from a previous Windows installation. Files and folders that may conflict with the installation of Windows have been moved to folders named Windows.old. You can access data from the previous Windows installations in this folder. I don't keep data there, so I want to check this. If the recycle bin had something in it, you want to check that. Temporary files. Programs sometimes store temporary information in a temp folder. You can safely delete temporary files that have not been modified in over a week. Before a program closes, it usually deletes them. It's taking up close to 13 megabytes. I'll delete that. Thumbnails. Windows keeps a copy of all your pictures, video, and document thumbnails so they can be displayed quickly when you open a folder. I find that advantageous, so I'm going to unclick that, as it takes a little while to recreate them. So now, based on my selections, I can free up 2.8 gigabytes. So that's 2.8 gigabytes I don't have to clone, don't have to go to the new drive. Clicking OK. Are you sure you want to permanently delete these files? Okay, disk cleanup is finished. So our next and final step of preparation is to see if the system drive needs optimization. So we're going to double click, defragment, and optimize drives. And one thing I've noticed that sometimes when you open this up, these percentages may not be accurate to the moment. So the drive we're interested in optimizing, we highlight it and then click Analyze. And it'll give us the latest information on its current status. Now in this case, it stayed the same, 1%. Typically, I wouldn't worry about a 1% fragmented, but because of it's a system drive and just to show the process in this video, I'm going to go ahead and click Optimize. Once this is done, then we have finished our preparation steps, and the next thing we'll do is shut down the computer and actually install the solid state drive into an available drive bay, and then we'll use the cloning software to clone the system from the current system drive to the SSD. At this point, the optimization has completed. So we're going to close the utilities, close all other applications, and restart the computer just to be sure everything is still working okay. And once we verify that, we will shut down the computer again and install the SSD and get it ready to be used. So I've shut down the computer, and the next thing I'm going to do is unplug it. Then I'm going to press and hold the start button for 30 seconds so that any residual electricity inside the computer will be dispersed. Next thing I need to do is remove the side panel so I can get to the hard drives inside the computer. On this computer, there's a latch in the back I need to release. I'm going to raise this. And then I'll remove the side panel. Now this computer, it has 4 internal drive bays, and each drive actually has a disk in it. So you're probably wondering, how are we going to put this drive into here and get it set up and cloned to? Well, it's very simple. For this process, the only drive I need is the system drive. The other 2 are data drives and one's a backup. So I'm just going to remove the backup drive temporarily, put this drive into that bay, close everything up, and then do the cloning process. Once everything is done, then the current system drive will be permanently removed from the computer and the new system drive will be put in its place. Now how do we know which disk is which? On this computer there's a little diagram that says this is drive bay 1, this is drive bay 2, this is drive bay 3, this is drive bay 4. But Windows does not number drives starting with 1. It actually starts numbering drives with 0. So disk 0 is in drive bay 1, disk 1 is in drive bay 2, disk 2 is in drive bay 3, disk 3 is in drive bay 4. If you look closely, you can see where I used a marker and numbered them based on the Windows numbering scheme. So what I'll be doing is I'll be removing disk 3 and in its place installing the SSD so that we can clone to it. Now in order to protect everything, this is a carpeted room. I'm wearing rubber sole shoes and I touch the chassis to neutralize myself and the chassis. I can touch the drive adapter, which is metal, to neutralize us. The other thing I do is I make sure I have everything handy so I don't have to get up and walk around, because getting up and walking around, you can generate static electricity. So we'll be removing this drive. This is the power cable, that's the data cable. So we just pull those off. And I always pull by the plug. Do not pull by the wires. And gently move them out of the way. Then I press it in these 2 tabs and pull the drive out. This plastic piece here is the chassis, and this is a 3.5 inch drive. As you can see, it is significantly bigger and thicker than the SSD. And this is why we needed to buy the adapter, so that we can put the SSD in that drive bay. So the steps will be install the SSD on the adapter, install the chassis on the adapter, and then insert it and replug it in. So at this point, I'm going to remove the 4 screws holding the chassis to the hard drive. And then the drive slides out. I'll just put this aside. Out of duster cloth, so there's a little bit of residual dust I want to get rid of. Okay, so let's install this drive to the adapter. These are the connections for data and power. And they will go into here. And after everything's installed, these cables will connect there. So you put your drive on and slide it on. Now it's connected. Now this particular adapter and drive, there's 4 screw holes where we can screw the adapter and the SSD together. This adapter actually came with 8 screws. 4 of them are used to connect the adapter and the drive. The other 4 can be used to connect the adapter to the drive bay. But in this case, we're going to use the chassis and the screws that came with the chassis to connect the chassis to the adapter, and then it all slides in. So we won't be using these particular ones. Now for me to order to line up the screws with the screw holes, I have to look straight into it, which will just get in the way of the camera. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go off camera to screw these 4 in. Now the way I did it was I put the screws in, but I didn't tighten them down. They're still a little loose here. And once they're all in and I know that everything's lined up, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them, but it is not a gorilla tight. It's just enough to secure it. And I always like to go across, so if I start here, this is the next one. Now we're going to be installing both of these into the chassis. So I slide this on. Now, this is a lot thinner than the hard drive, so there's a lot of play in there. If you remember, we removed 4 screws out of the chassis. So I want to go again off camera so I can make sure that the hole in the chassis is aligned with the hole in the adapter. And then put in all 4 screws. Alright, we have everything connected now. The drive to the adapter to the chassis. So we're going to put this into drive bay 4, reconnect power, reconnect data. As I was putting the chassis on, I made sure I was not touching any of the contact points. Now this computer, you push it in until it clicks. Now these plugs do not click on, they just slide on. Or they just slide straight in. That one is on. Doesn't matter which order, you can do power first, then data. All right, everything's connected. At this point, I want to put the side panel back on. I want to replug the computer, and then I want to power everything on. All right, we're back on the computer. And before we can start doing the cloning, we actually have to initialize the disk to get it ready to be used. To do that, we'll use the disk management utility. So we're going to go to Control Panel, Administrative Tools, and then Computer Management. And click on Disk Management. Okay, it's telling us we must initialize the disk before a logical disk manager can access it. It's showing disk 3. If you remember, we put the SSD in drive bay 4, but because Windows starts numbering their drives with 0, disk 3 is the actual drive in drive bay 4. So this is correct. It's asking us which partition style to use, master boot record or GPT. Cloning software I use cannot clone from one partition style to another. I know for a fact because I checked it earlier. Disk 0, its partition style is master boot record. And after we initialize the disk, I can show you how I use disk management utility to figure that out. So we're going to leave it master boot record. I'm going to click OK. Here we have disk 3, and it's unallocated, which is actually what we want. Can only do a system clone to unallocated space. I want to show you a short clip right now that I made earlier of what happens if you try to clone to allocated space. Right now I want to show you something about the cloning software that's important to understand. So let me start the software. We'll be using System Clone, and you'll select it. Now it will automatically default to selecting your system drive as the source. We will then be picking our SSD, which is not installed yet. That's why it's not showing up on the screen. But I'm just going to pick a drive. I'm not actually going to do the clone, but I want to show you something. Click Next. It's giving us a warning. It says there's not enough unallocated space on the target disk. So what this cloning software needs to do a system clone, it needs the target drive to be installed and set up so that all of its space is unallocated. You can't go through the process of like formatting the hard drive, because if you do that, that process will allocate all the space. You won't have any files in that space, but it will allocate it. And once that space is allocated, you won't be able to use the system clone. So I just wanted to show you this is a characteristic of this cloning software. So as we go through the process of installing the SSD, we want to make sure that the space remains unallocated so we can do the system clone. Alright, we're back to this portion of the video. If you had watched my other video about installing a hard drive to store data, you know we went through 3 steps. We initialized it, we made it a simple volume, and we formatted it. In this case, we do not want to do the other 2, because as soon as you start doing the other 2, all of this space becomes allocated, and then the cloning software cannot copy to it. So right now the disk 3, our SSD, is ready to be cloned to. How did I know that disk 0 was a master boot record? Well, I just right click disk 0, click on properties, click on volumes, disk 0, partition style, master boot record. Again, the cloning software cannot clone one partition style to another, so since I'm cloning from disk 0, which is a master boot record partition style, my target drive, disk 3, also has to be a master boot record. So we're going to close out of here. So we're ready to clone the drives. So let's start up the cloning software. We're going to pick System Clone. And when you pick System Clone, it automatically defaults to the source drive being the system disk. As you can tell, it also tells us its partition style is MBR master boot record. So we need to pick the target disk, which of course is our SSD. Since we're cloning to an SSD, we also need to pick Advanced Options and check Optimize for SSD. There's another option called Sector by Sector Clone. Let me read to you the help information for that option. A sector by sector clone ensures that the destination partition is exactly the same as the source partition. It will clone all the sectors if the option is checked, even if the sector is blank. As a result, the target will be equal in size to the disk being cloned after the process. The disk part/partition cannot be resized if you choose to clone your disk in the sector by sector mode. As we'll see, we're actually going to be adding some unallocated space to the OS partition, so I will not be picking this option. This we're not doing, so click Next. At this point, it is starting the clone, and I'm going to shut down the video software because I do not want any kind of application running while it's cloning the system drive, and that includes not checking emails, not starting an internet browser. We want the only thing running is the cloning software. Okay, the clone is finished. Looks like it took 37 minutes for this particular clone. Showing here it's the progress. It initialized, it started cloning the master boot record, then started cloning the recovery partition, which it gave drive letter A. Then it started cloning the operating system partition, which it gave drive letter B. Started cloning volume, checking the target, copying the source, committed it, completed it, finished assigning the drive letters, updating the system information, and complete it. So let's exit out of the clone software and take a look in File Explorer. Here are the two partitions on the SSD. Again, the cloning software gave this drive letter A, this drive letter B. Just in case you don't know, drive letters A and B were actually a holdover from the days when desktops had used diskette drives. The first diskette drive was drive letter A, the second diskette drive was drive letter B. Generally, A and B are not used anymore. To me, it doesn't matter because we'll be changing this anyway. In fact, on this one, I'm going to remove the drive letter so it doesn't show up in File Explorer anymore. And as I switch things around, this one should show up as drive C because I would have removed this one. So next, let's go into the disk management utility and finish a few things up. Alright, to get to the disk management utility, we go to Start. And again, I have Control Panel over here. If you don't, just put your cursor over here and type Control Panel and then select it. Administrative Tools, Computer Management, Disk Management. This is the disk management utility. Okay, this is the SSD. We see that it cloned the recovery partition, 8.22 gigabytes, 8.22. It cloned the system partition, 271.2, 271.2. And this is the space that's left over on the SSD. We're going to do two things now. The first thing is I'm going to remove this drive letter from this partition because I don't want it showing up in File Explorer. So I'm going to right click it, change drive letter, remove. So some programs that rely on drive letters might not run correctly. I've never had a drive A on this computer, so that is not going to be an issue. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to take this space and add it to here so that the system partition will take up the rest of the space on the SSD. So we right click this partition, we click Extend Volume, starts up the wizard, click Next. Here it's showing how much space is available to be added to the OS partition. Obviously we want it all, so I'm not going to decrease this number. It defaults to picking the maximum. I'm going to click Next. Here it's just verifying what we're going to do. Click Finish. Alright, now you may have seen this box get bigger. It didn't get bigger because space got added to it. It's still 8.22 and the original's 8.22. All the extra space is now sitting in the OS partition, which is where the operating system is. I'm not going to change the drive letter here because what we'll be doing soon is we're going to be shutting down the computer, removing this drive, and taking this drive and putting it into drive bay 1. And when we boot up, the operating system will reallocate the drive letters. It should give it drive C, but we'll see. If it doesn't, I'll make it C. So at this point, we're going to get out of disk management. Now what I'm going to go into next is defragment and optimize drives. Alright, what we want to see under media type is that right there. Solid state drive, solid state drive. This tells us that Windows is recognizing that new drive as an SSD instead of a hard drive, which is exactly what we want to see. Now under current status it says it needs optimization, needs optimization. It kind of doesn't. If you recall, early in the video we went ahead and optimized the source partition. So when it was cloned from here to here, optimization should have been retained. But for purposes of this video, I'm going to go ahead and click optimize, and it should quickly go to OK 0% fragmented. Alright, so that one's done. And just to be consistent, I'm going to go ahead and optimize this one. Before it's kind of telling us this is new and it doesn't know the condition it's in. But by going through the optimization, it now understands the condition. So we're going to go ahead and close this. So at this point, we're going to shut down the computer and switch drives. And we'll be booting from the new SSD. Okay, well the computer's been shut down. It has been unplugged. I've held down the start button for 30 seconds to disperse any residual electricity. And what we're going to do next is remove the SSD, permanently remove, at least we hope it's permanent, remove the current system drive, and then put the SSD drive in bay 1, close everything up, and start the computer. Hopefully, the computer will be able to boot from the SSD and operate as normal. Now we're going to remove disk 0, but in order to do that I need to unplug disk 1 so I can get all the cabling out of the way so I can remove disk 0. So let's put in the SSD. And now we're going to reconnect the cabling. And it slides on, doesn't clip on. This is cable labeled 1 for the drive bay 1. Now I'm not actually going to put back that fourth drive. If you watch my other video on installing a drive for the purpose of storing data, This drive I use as a backup to the operating system. And the way I do that is on occasion I clone from this drive to this drive. Well, I purchased two SSDs, one to go here, one to go here. So after I verify everything is working, this part will not be on the video. I'm going to go back and open up, put in the SSD here, initialize it, clone from here to here, and then I'll be back operating on two SSDs, one being a backup clone of the system drive. So just to save me some time, I'm not going to put that drive in because I want to turn around and take it out. Now we're going to close the computer up, turn it back on, and hopefully everything is going to work fine. We're back on the system. The computer was able to boot without an issue from the SSD. Let's go into administrative tools and just check out a few things. We go into disk management. Okay, this is the SSD. When does it give it the appropriate drive letter as they move things around? So this is all good to see. So the next thing I'm going to do is open up my application software, such as Photoshop and some others, and just make sure that they're running just fine. But so far it's working really well. So I hope this video has been useful to you, and thank you for watching.